Hello, everyone. Good to have you all here with us today. It's Wednesday, 25th of August 2021. It's 9 p.m. here in Ireland, and we have a pleasure to have our friends from the UK, from Lithuania, and our special guest, Professor Alex. And my name is Stevan Bertozzo, FAUT friends. Hope to have you all here. Let me introduce Professor Alex. Alex Karcioff is affiliated to the University of São Paulo in Brazil, where he's currently working as associate professor. Professor Karcioff has authored and co-authored over 60 international publications and works as reviewer for the main journals in astronomy. His area of research is massive stars with an emphasis on the dynamics of their circumstellar matter. And today's topic is life in other worlds, and therefore, why we have with us today Professor Alex. But meanwhile, I want to say good night to everyone, and let's start the introduction with Professor Alex. Professor Alex, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Stevan. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Charles, Elsa, Nadja, Silvia, for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to be here with you.
Okay, so ladies first, Charles.
Oh, it's a matter.
Yeah, ladies first. So, ladies first.
Okay. I'd like to say that we are more than happy with Dr. Alex tonight. We talked before, and so good, special information will come. Wait, and invite your friends to watch tonight, because it's really a good topic. And some news will broadcast everywhere, because life in another planets, another world, we have to think about. Okay, bless you all. Thank you all for being with us. Make your questions and put in your chat. Don't leave for the end of the meeting. Before that, so Dr. Alex will answer your questions. So welcome all. Thank you.
Sou eu, então? Hello a todos, boa noite, good evening. It's nice to be here with you. Many blessings, asking the blessings of God to all of us and to everyone in this world. And I'm looking forward to the talk, so I'm going to be brief. Good night. Hello, good evening.
Labas vakaras visiems. Mes dėkojame, kad profesorius Alex yra iš Brazilijos ir atėjo šiandien pakalbėti su mumis. Jis yra mūsų kvietinis kalbėtojas ir astrofizikas ir kalbės apie gyvenimą kitose planetose arba gyvybės galimybę kitose planetose. Tikiuosi, kad jums bus naudinga ir laukiu mūsų kvietinis kalbėtoja. Ačiū visiems.
Okay. Mr. Kempf.
Bonsoir à tous, heureux d'être de nouveau parmi vous ce soir et notamment avec notre professeur Alex, astrophysicien à l'université de Sao Paulo, qui va nous parler donc de la pluralité des mondes habités, autant d'un point de vue d'astrophysicien que du point de vue spirit. Donc ce sera une émission très très intéressante ce soir. Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone. Happy to be here again with you today. And also with our Professor Alex, which is astrophysics in the University of São Paulo, who will talk to us about the plurality of inhabited worlds, both on the spiritist and also on the scientific points of view.
Great, thank you all. It's wonderful to have this moment. And without losing any minute, I want to say hello to our dear friends. Maria Eugênia from Munich, good to have you, my dear. Marisa from Brazil, thank you. Beatriz Gilles, thank you for your presence, Beatriz. And our friends from Unenlar, União Espírita Nosso Lar, so good to have you all here with us. And our dear friend from Sweden, Leah, good night in Sweden. So let's start. Always, I will put a short video. We cannot forget our friend from California, Hobby Brown. Thank you, Hobby, for being here with us. And let me put the video here. Oh, okay. Without any pressure, Professor Alex, this Unilar is your brother, so you have eyes watching you. Okay?
Hello,
so it's no pressure. Okay. Let's put this video here. Once we finish the video, Professor Alex will keep going with his talk. And as Elsa said, if you do have any questions, please write your questions. Don't let the question for the last minute, because we may have to finish without ask your question. So if you have any question you have popping up in your mind right now, please write it, and we will do our best in order to answer your questions. Okay, let me share my screen here and put it here, and let's go.
Is universal space infinite or limited? Infinite. If it had limits, what would be beyond them? Suppose we were to imagine a limit to space. No matter how far out our thought may place it, reason tells us that there must still be something beyond it, and so on and so forth to infinity. Even if there were only an absolute void beyond that limit, there would still be space, because what appears to you to be a void is actually occupied by matter that cannot be detected by your senses or instruments. From the divine omnipotence follows the consequent omnipresence of God, which leads us to the impossibility of conceiving any really empty place in the universe.
Okay, that's. Can I begin then?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, if you want to share your screen, my friend, I can show it here.
Okay. So I prepared a short presentation to help us today. Can you see my screen well?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's begin. And today's topic is life in other worlds, which is, of course, a very interesting topic and a very modern topic, because this is a very important area of research in astronomy today. And I will start talking about pluralism. So what's pluralism? It's the idea that we may have like a large number or even infinite number of Earths and different humanities. And this idea has been around for many thousand years, where there has been a debate about two opposing stances, one in which Earth, and therefore humanity, is unique in the cosmos, and the other stance, the other view, is the pluralist view. There are many Earth, many humanities. So in an astronomical context, then, pluralism is the belief that there exist numerous other worlds harboring life, and in particular, intelligent life. That's very interesting. Intelligent life as a requirement to build a civilization like we have on Earth. And of course, before science, uh, there was a lack of scientific data, and because of that, the discussion was forced entirely into a philosophical or theological footing. And only recently we have astronomical data to bring into the discussion both astronomical and biological considerations. And from an old philosophical and religious idea, so the idea of pluralism, uh, this became today one of the most important goals of modern science. So I think this is probably the holy grail of astronomers. Who is going to be the first astronomer or the first group or the first telescope to find solid, real evidence, scientific evidence of life outside Earth? So there are such a thing doesn't exist yet, but perhaps we are very close to it. So if there is life in some other place, in some place other than Earth, we have never been so close to finding it. So let's begin with early traditions in schools, and I'd like to bring this text from the Bhagavata Purana. So Bhagavata Purana is the book of lore of the Lord, book of God. Look at what is written there. Because you are unlimited, you here in capital, meaning they are addressing God, right? Because you are unlimited, neither the lords of heaven nor even you yourself can ever reach the end of your glories. The countless universes, look here, countless universes, each enveloped in its shell, are compelled by the will of time to wander within you like particles of dust blowing about in the sky. So how beautiful, very poetic text clearly stating a belief. This is 3,000 years ago, a belief about unlimited, countless universes. And now let's go back to, let's begin talking about Spiritism a little bit. So this is the Spiritist book, question 221a. Is it the same memory? He's talking about this sentiment of the existence of God. Is the same memory, the same sentiment to which are owed certain beliefs related to the Spiritist doctrine and which are found in all cultures? The answer is this doctrine is as old as the world. That's why we find it everywhere, proof that is true. Look at this part, how interesting it is. Since it preserves an intuition of its spirit state, the incarnate spirit possesses an instinctive awareness of the invisible world. So this way we can explain how this very radical, very profound concept of pluralism, it's been around forever, for thousands of years, right? Is these innate ideas, right? That the Spiritism explains so well. So another way of looking into this idea, also in the Spiritist book, question 626, have the divine or natural laws been revealed to humankind only by Jesus? Before him, were they only known by intuition? The answer is the following. Haven't we stated that they are written everywhere? From the remotest time, all who have meditated on reason have been able to understand and teach these laws. That is why, so I'm going to jump a little bit here, that is why the precepts of the divine laws have been proclaimed by moral persons in all ages. So, again, no surprise that this very interesting idea of pluralism and like the plurality of inhabited worlds has been around for so long. In ancient Greece, we are going to find two opposing stances in Greek philosophy. There is a monistic view in which Earth is unique and there can be no other worlds. And this view has been held by Aristotle, for instance, Plato. In the words of Aristotle, for instance, the world must be unique. There cannot be several words. However, there is an there were, right, an opposing view, a pluralist view, supported by atomists, for instance. such as Leucippus, Democritus, and Epicurus. Democritus, for instance, was the first to claim that the Milky Way is made of stars. So it's very interesting that today it's an obvious idea to everyone. Everyone knows science because we learned this in school. We see TV shows and documentaries and stuff like that. We know that the night sky, those lights on the night sky, are stars. This is obvious for the human modern mind, but in the past this was far from obvious, and this was Democritus was the first to state that. So it's important to observe here that multiple words in this pluralistic view for the ancient Greeks didn't mean what we understand today, like worlds orbiting other suns. We are going to talk about this a little bit later, but they are talking about different cosmoi. Cosmoi is the plural word for cosmos, so different, which is universe in Greek. So different cosmoi, different universes that do not interact with each other. That's what they had in mind when they were talking about words. I'm referring, of course, about the ancient Greeks. Now, after the classical era, right, we have the early Christian era throughout the Middle Ages. And here we know that there has been very little discussion on pluralism, right? This monistic view that there is only one Earth has been very prevalent in Europe throughout these many, many centuries. Why? Because the conventional geocentric view that put Earth in the center of the universe and put mankind as the reason for God's creation, this view suited the church quite well. However, assuming one Earth, one of the difficulties that people had with pluralism at that time is that assuming one Earth, right, and therefore the fact that humankind has a very privileged position in the cosmos, right, avoided serious theological concerns. One of them is related to this doctrine of redemption. This doctrine of redemption is that there is a redeemer, right, Christ. So if there are many humanities scattered around the universe, there must be many Christs. And how is that possible if Christ is one and only? So that's a very difficult situation for these people that hold, right, these churches' belief in a very hard way. So but even then, even in the medieval ages, there were those who opposed this view, based on the idea that limiting the creation of the cosmos, the creation to one cosmos, placed unacceptable restrictions to God's power. So God is being all powerful. It must be possible for him to create many universes, right? This is one argument against this monistic view. Also, this philosopher Nicholas of Cusa, he proposed this principle of plenitude. Whatever lay in God's power must have been realized. So even in the Middle Ages, there were some pluralist views, but the mainstream, of course, was monistic. Now we come to the dawn of modern astronomy. We are talking about all the revolution in human beliefs and human concepts about the universe that started in the 16th century, right? And I'm going to list some of the main cornerstones, some of the main discoveries, some of the main statements. So one of them, of course, everyone is familiar with Nicolaus Copernicus, and he was the one who proposed a heliocentric view of the cosmos. So he proposed that the sun is at the center, right? And this is a sketch from his book, De Revolutionibus Orbium Celestium, which means on the revolutions of the celestial orbs. So here we have the sun at the center, and then Mercury, and then Venus, Earth with the moon around it, and so forth. Of course, we know that this is not true. The sun has no special place in the universe, but that has been a major step forward, very, very important one. The next personality is, of course, Galileo Galilei. And he was not the one who invented the telescope. And many people believe that he invented the telescope. He was a very apt telescope builder, but he didn't invent the telescope. However, he was the first one to take the telescope and point it to the stars. And this was done in 1605, 412 years ago. So it's very modern in human terms, right? Very recent in human history that we, for the first time, look at the stars with a machine, right? That allows us to see better, basically. And these are drawings of the phases of the moon with his own hands. So this is Galileo, and this is his own these are his own drawings of the moon, showing different phases. And you can see the craters here. He was the one who first discovered that the surface of the moon has craters. And I could talk for really literally 1 hour here just about the discoveries of Galileo. There were many and very fundamental, and they changed our view of the cosmos forever. So the next very important character is Johannes Kepler. Johannes Kepler proposed the laws of planetary motion. So with Johannes Kepler, we started to put on a mathematical ground, or to describe on mathematical terms, how the planets move around the sun. That has been a very important discovery. And this is Johannes Kepler. And Johannes Kepler was followed by Sir Isaac Newton about a century later. And Isaac Newton used Kepler's discovery of, or actually not used, but proved, demonstrated Johannes Kepler laws of planetary motion using the law of universal gravitation. So if you were to name one of the most important scientific discovery of all times, I think this would be on the, like, say, top 5 list. This discovery by Newton that using the law of universal gravitation, we can explain mathematically the planetary motions, whose laws have been discovered by Johannes Kepler. This is very, very fundamental. So I'm going to mention two characters, two astronomers that are not so well known. The first one is Giovanni Domenico Cassini. He, among many other things, he was the first one to make an accurate measurement of the distance between the Earth and the Sun. How he did that? Well, I cannot talk about this, unfortunately. I don't have the time, but he did it. And this is very important. And this led the ground to 1 century later, a German astronomer, Friedrich Bessel, in the 19th century. So this is together with Kardec, more or less simultaneous with Kardec. He measured the distance, for the first time, the distance to a star, whose name is 61 Cygni. And soon after that, people start measuring distance to other stars. And today we measured the distance to billions and billions of stars using astronomical satellites. But the first one was Friedrich Bessel. Why this is important? That's important. And then also I highlighted these two things in blue, because since the earliest of times, in the dawn of humanity, we have looked up to the skies and we have wondered what we are looking at. What are those dots? What are those black spots? Why there are more stars in some more light or more dots in some places and less in others? This question has been around. And for the first time, when Friedrich Bessel measured the distance to a star, we demonstrated what? We demonstrated that these little lights in the night sky are simply other suns, sometimes like our own sun, and sometimes quite different. And naturally, this groundbreaking discovery invited to several speculations, and this is very, very important. Do these stars harbor planets, as the sun does? We know that the sun has planets, 8 planets. The other stars, do they have planets? Are these planets similar to the ones found in our own planetary systems? We know that we have planets that are very small, like Mercury. When we have planets that are giant, like Jupiter. And are the planets around other suns, other stars, similar to the ones we have here? And finally, is there life on other worlds, both within the solar system and beyond? All those are fundamental questions. And we have answers for the first two. Science has already questions to, to the first two, and I'm going to talk about them, but we don't have yet, from the scientific point of view, we don't have yet an answer to the third one, right? So let's come back to in time, and let's come back in time and imagine ourselves in a bookstore in Paris in the year 1861. There, we are going to find a very young man called Flamir Clamarion. He's 19, and he's secretly, privately writing a book that is going to be called later La pluralité de monde habité, the plurality of the inhabited worlds, right? This became a huge success. This book became like a blockbuster, if you wish. It was translated to several tens of languages in the coming, already in the 19th century. So it was a huge success. What he found in that bookstore, he was like browsing a book, he was skimming through a book, and he found that this book was talking about the plurality of the inhabited worlds. However, this book the information was not coming from the author of the book. The information was coming by the spirits, and that caught his attention. And of course, I'm talking about Le Livre des Esprits, the spirits book. And that was the book that he was skimming when he was 19 years old. And of course, after that, he became friends of Kardec. He became a lifelong collaborator of Kardec and a very important character in Spiritism. He also wrote this book, Astronomie Populaire, like popular astronomy, which also became a very, very, very important, very, very successful book at his time. So why am I mentioning all this? I'm mentioning because the idea of many inhabited worlds was an idea that was present in the scientific society in Europe in the 19th century. It's not an invention of Spiritism, and it's not an invention of Camille Flammarion. This idea has been around for a long time, since many thousand years ago. But now people were starting to talk about this with a more from a scientific approach, say, right? And what I want to mention here is that the idea of many inhabited worlds is a key concept in the Spiritist doctrine. So it's not only a key concept in science, but it's also a key concept in Spiritism, it's Spiritist doctrine. We can discuss this later. There's going to be time for discussion later. But think about it. How else can we reconcile a Spiritistic idea such as the law of progress, which you can find in the Spirit book, chapter 13, part 3. How can we reconcile this idea, the law of progress, with reincarnation, for instance? And I'm going to give an example. There is this paper called The Demographic Studies Concerning Reincarnation. The author is Alexandre Gonçalves, is a Brazilian. And he studied, like from a demographic perspective, the phenomenon of reincarnation. And one of their conclusions, the conclusion of the authors, was that currently at least 1 billion souls that are incarnated on Earth now, 1 billion, 1/8 of the population, are doing so for the first time in the last 20,000 years. Because before the population was small and was growing, and it's a mathematical fact that this idea that we have that every single one of us incarnated many, many times since the time of Christ. This cannot have happened, at least not on Earth, because there has been not enough people for that. And that's why this paper is so fascinating. It's a very interesting idea. So 1 billion souls currently incarnated on Earth are doing so for the first time in the last 20,000 years. And this idea is strongly suggestive that if you have a law of progress that demands that people reincarnated, most likely, the previous incarnations of many people currently living on Earth was happened in other words, right? So that's the idea behind what I'm trying to bring here to you. We can discuss this later. So the point is that from a spiritist perspective, the idea of many inhabited worlds is a key concept. And we can see this in question 55, for instance. Are all the globes spinning through space inhabited? Yes. And contrary to what Earthling believes, they themselves are far from being first in intelligence, goodness, and perfection. Very interesting and humbling answer, right? Question 56. Is the physical composition of all the different globes the same? No, they don't resemble one another at all. I highlighted this because this is very important in regards to what science is finding. I'm going to talk a little bit about this soon. And finally, question 57, since the physical composition of all the various worlds is not the same, do the beings inhabiting them have a different physical organization? Of course, such as on yours, fish are made for living in the water and birds for living in the air. So, fascinating answer that proposes that in different planets we have very, very different life forms. Okay, and now very briefly, I think I've been talking for way too long already. So in 2 minutes, I'm going to give you a very quick perspective from astronomy on pluralism. So the question is, how many exoplanets? What's an exoplanet? Is a planet that is not from this solar system, is from another stellar system, another planetary system. So how many exoplanets are known to science today? Well, 11 have been discovered via direct imaging, like a picture. Only 11? Yes, because it's very hard to make an image of a planet. So if you want to understand how hard it is, imagine that you have one of these spotlights, like this huge one from stadiums, right? And next to it, you have a very feeble, very faint, very small firefly. And this firefly is flying around this spotlight. Now, you have to differentiate from a distance the brightness, the light from the firefly, from the light of the spotlight. However, the challenge of astronomers is to do so at 60,000 kilometers. So imagine that this spotlight were 6,000 kilometers away. And 6,000 kilometers away, you have a firefly around it, and you have to identify it, you have to image it. So it is extremely difficult to do that because the star is so much brighter than the planet. That's why only 11. But here's an example, a true example from astronomy, where you have the central star that has been masked a little bit, and you have a planet around it, and you have a ring of material where other planets are being formed. This is a fascinating image and only shown yesterday, released yesterday. This is very new. Sorry for that.
Estou aprendendo a escolher os apps.
So there is 840 planets discovered via spectroscopy, 3,305 planets discovered via planetary transits, and 51 planets discovered by other means. So we have a grand total of, right now, 4,207 planets known to science. And this number is growing fast. So what lessons have science learned so far? First, we have a huge diversity of planets, exactly what we can find in the Spirits book. Planets are very diverse. They are smaller than Earth to bigger than Jupiter. Planets occupy different orbits around their host stars. Like, for instance, they can be closer to the star than Mercury itself, very close to the star. Planets orbit very diverse stars. Some stars that harbor planets are very small. Some stars that harbor planets are huge and hot. So we have diversity, and that's very interesting. Another lesson that we learned is that planets are very common. So one thing that science has proven beyond doubt is that there are more planets than stars in the galaxy. So if our galaxy has 300 billion stars, we have probably way more than that planets in our galaxy. And the third lesson, which is kind of interesting for us from the perspective of human life, is that it is about Earth-like planets. What's an Earth-like planet? It's a planet where the conditions are more or less the same as the Earth: the size, gravity. This planet has water and has about the same temperature, stuff like that. Even Earth-like planets, which is a subset of all the planets, are quite numerous. Current estimates range from 20 to 90 billion of Earth-like planets in our galaxy alone. Okay, so this pretty much ends my presentation. So I thank you very much for your patience. And I think we can start our discussion from here.
Thank you very much. Very insightful for us. And we do have here a kind of comment. We can start with this. It's coming from our friend Robbie Brown in California. Pluralism embraces success. Why give the knowledge for our advancement to only one group? Why put life on only one planet? If I wanted, I would plant the message in many places in order to ensure its success. The same applies to inhabitable planets.
Well, thank you very much, Robbie. This is a very interesting perspective, right? That I think makes God's creation even greater to our eyes, right? And of course, we have this same view. We can find this same view in Spiritism, for instance. This view that things have been created for a purpose, right? That the universe is not here like this huge universe. It would be silly to imagine that this huge universe would be here just to be a beautiful sight in the night sky for human beings, in a small grain of sand hanging around a small planet, a small star in a corner of the galaxy, right? So yeah, I think that we should embrace a much, broader view of creation, of course.
Great. Another one.
Just a comment, right? I think one of the branches of philosophy that I find very interesting is teleology. Teleology is this branch of philosophy that says that things should have a purpose on themselves, right? So I would say that Spiritism is in his own way very a partisan of this branch of philosophy where things must have a purpose in creation, right?
Great. Another question here from Alvus. Congratulations, Alex. How is the estimated percentage of planets with life? Do we have these estimations?
Well, how can we have this estimation? So we have a concept in astronomy which is easy to understand, even though it's quite difficult to put in mathematical formulation, which is the concept of habitable region. What does that mean? So suppose that we have our sun, we have our earth that we know so well. So this is the sun, this is the earth, right? Let's suppose that earth was very, very close to the sun. What would happen to earth? Earth would become too hot, water would boil, water would be lost through space, and would have a dry, barren land, but dry, barren planet. So a planet cannot be too close to its host star. Imagine now that Earth is fairly far away, like Jupiter or Mars, Jupiter or Saturn, or even Neptune, or even farther. Then Earth would not be getting enough heat, enough warmth to have like temperatures where water is in its liquid state. So if Earth were too far away, the water from Earth would be frozen solid, right? So the concept of inhabited region or of habitability region is that you have ideal region where a planet should be, so that if this planet does have water, the water is in liquid state and therefore can form, and life is more probable in a situation like this. So this number that I gave, between 20 billion to 90 billion planets, are the results of a very recent study using one of NASA's satellites called Kepler, aptly called Kepler. Kepler alone found 2,500 planets. And based on those results, we could extrapolate this for the rest of the galaxy, meaning that Earth-like planets are quite common in our galaxy and probably in the universe too.
Wonderful. And thanks for the questions, everybody. We have a question here from Maria Eugenia. Thanks for your presentation, Alex. Could you briefly mention some of the technology restraints that prevent us from identifying life in other planets?
Well, do you remember, thank you for the question, Maria Eugenia. Do you remember that picture that I showed where you have a ring and you have a small blob, that's something that I told you was a planet? That thing is a speckle of light. So it's completely impossible for modern technology to take an image of a planet and to say, here, you have continents, and you have forests, and you have civilization. Here's a plane flying. It's impossible. It's completely out of our reach. So imagine something completely impossible to size. This is to make an image of a planet to show that this planet has life. So forget about that. It's impossible. So how can we hope to find life in other planets? That's a very good question. We can hope. We hope from two ways. The first way is from receiving messages, right? Earth has been broadcasting radio messages for a very long time, since radio was invented. So if there is a nearby civilization that's capable of actually reading like radio messages, this civilization may actually identify us through our radio waves. So radio waves is a possibility. Radio waves travel all the way through the galaxy, and perhaps it's one way we are going to find one. There has been a massive efforts with radio telescopes operating in the radio for 40 years of monitoring, and so far, nothing. The universe is radio silent, at least from when you think about intelligent messages. So, but that's one possibility. This is called SETI. SETI is Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, right? Another way, which I find much more probable, is through spectroscopy. So consider that how life changed our planet. Like we have oxygen in our atmosphere, for instance. Oxygen is a very important part of our atmospheric composition, right? So, and oxygen only exists in the planet on Earth because of life. It's life that produces oxygen. If there were no life, there would be no oxygen. So, if we point a telescope to a planet, we take a spectrum, we can perhaps identify molecules like oxygen or even chlorophyll. We can identify this through spectroscopy. So that's our biggest bet at the moment. Scientists are building huge telescopes with huge spectrographs to for the first time, take a spectrum of a planet. And if this spectrum contains like biomarkers that we say, chlorophyll, oxygen, and other things, we will therefore prove that that planet has life. I don't know if it was clear enough. Perhaps it was a little bit too technical, but I can clarify if that was not clear enough.
Yeah. Let me see here. Elsa, you are in mute.
No?
Okay. Do you have any question, my dear?
No, I was thinking about the books that we are studying that says about the, of course, plurality of inhabited worlds, about the Jupiter, in the Spiritist magazine or Revue Spirit, talk about the life in Jupiter, have drawings of the house in Jupiter. In the Letters of a Dead Woman by Csikszentmihalyi, talk about the planets with the 3 stars, and she was there. She was talking about how the people are behaving there, about the animals, etc. Very nice teachings that is only in Spiritism, but we don't see it, of course, in the scientific way for now, because there is no equipment enough to prove that. But the messages are so clear talking about.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
that's a very interesting question, Elsa. For instance, in that of Letters of a Dead Woman, as you mentioned, she mentioned the possibility that there is life on Mars. However, science know that this doesn't exist. We've sent machines there. We took photographs from very, very close. We have satellites now orbiting that planet, and we don't see anything. So we have to understand we have to still to reconcile this, how to reconcile the fact that science is showing that Mars is a barren planet. We didn't find evidence of a single microbe there yet with these letters from that woman. So I think I have no answer. I think this is a matter for further research, and we have to find a way to clarify this. For instance, life on Jupiter. We've been to Jupiter through probes. We took pictures of Jupiter from very, very close. We took spectra, right? And Jupiter has no solid surface. Jupiter is a gaseous planet. It is only atmosphere. There is no solid surface on Jupiter. So how to reconcile that? And some of the Spiritist teaching is something still, I think it is just an open area of research. We have to understand this better. Perhaps the Spiritists are referring to some other type of life, perhaps life in the spirit world, perhaps, not in the material world. But the fact is that we cannot deny the fact that science have been to these planets, and there is no life there. That's a fact. Now, how to understand this, how to reconcile this, is another matter.
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. We do have here 3 questions. Let me go to the topic. Complementation from Maria Eugenia. No, it's here. It's the other one. Thanks, Alex. Taking into account that the space distance is measured in light years, if any of the 11 exoplanets send us message, what's the earthly time until the message actually reaches us?
That's a good question too. So science, it's much easier to find planets that's in our neighborhood, say. What's the solar neighborhood? The solar neighborhood is like the stars that are very close to us. What's the star closest to us? Is Proxima Centauri, 1.3 light years. So if there is a planet in Proxima Centauri, and there is because we found it, but if there is a civilization, they would say it would be a very, say, awkward WhatsApp conversation because they would say hello, and then 2.6 years later, they would say hello back. But communication would be possible, right? It would be possible. You can send a message, and then 2.6 years later, they would send you a message back. And some of these 11 exoplanets that we're discovering through images, they are in the range of 10 light years, 20 light years. So that makes things more difficult. So a planet that is 100 light years away, you send a hello, and then it takes 200 light years because it's 100 light years to 100 years to go and 100 years to come back. So you say hello, 200 years later, you get a hello back. So it's not a very efficient way of communication. So our only hopes to communicate with the extraterrestrial life is if we find a civilization that's very close to us, but that has not been found yet, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question, Silvia?
Yeah, Miss Gibbons wants to ask a question. Yes.
Yes, it's written here in the chat. Our solar system has been found to be very different from how solar systems are formed. Can you say something about it? So, indeed, one of the messages from modern astronomy is diversity. So there are diverse planets, and there are also very diverse planetary systems. So we can find, for instance, planetary systems that are very compact. The entire system, everything, the star and all the planets, they fit within Mercury's orbit. For instance, very compact, very tiny, close to ours. We can find planetary systems that are huge. Some systems only have gas giants. Some systems do not have any gas giants. So one thing for sure is that we didn't find yet a solar system that we can say, okay, this solar system or this planetary system is a twin of our solar system. This didn't happen. So our solar system is unique in its configuration, but every other solar system, planetary system is the same. So the message is diversity, right? Planetary systems are very diverse, very different. And I again mention the fact that this is stated in the Spiritist book. The diversity message is there, which is kind of very interesting.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Another question we have here from our friend Guilherme Diaz. Are our instruments able to identify any type of life?
Olá, Guilherme. So yes, our instruments are able to identify any type of life in an indirect way through the changes that life, the impact of life on the atmosphere. One thing that astronomers can do is to measure chemical compositions. We do this using spectrographers since the 19th century, right? And this is like everyday, like a Brazilian joke, like rice and bean astronomy, right? Every day, feijão com arroz, right? We do this every day. We take spectra and we measure chemical compositions. Now, we are not yet capable of taking a spectra of a planet because these require a huge telescope. And those telescopes are being built. In 4 or 5 years, when the giant Magellan telescope comes into operation, and this is a telescope that has a strong Brazilian participation, it's going to be the largest telescope on the planet with 27 meters of diameter, larger than an Olympic pool. Imagine that, right? This telescope will be able to take a spectra of a planet. And if that planet has life, and that life has changed the atmosphere, we are going to be able to see it, right? So that's one way. Now, another way of looking for life outside Earth is here in the solar system, right? We tried on Mars, nothing. We tried on Jupiter, nothing. But there are possibility of life elsewhere, like for instance in Ganymedes. Ganymedes is
Ganymede,
Ganymedes, yes,
Europa,
yes. Ganymedes is one of the moons from
Jupiter.
Jupiter, right? So there is a possibility. So some people believe that there is a ocean of water underneath the surface of Ganymedes. So perhaps there's life there, but we didn't find it yet. So there is an active research, field of research going on, trying to find life here in our solar system, very close to us. But so far, we didn't find anything. Europa too. Europa too.
Great. So, Nadja, Charles.
Yeah, I was gonna. Can you hear me now? Because you said
Yes,
that my
much
microphone
better,
was.
much better.
I think it was my hair like this. I'm sorry. Thank you for the presentation. First of all, I think most of my question you answered because I was gonna talk and ask about the vapor of water found recently, no? Or found or just disclosed recently by NASA, that there were vapor of water on this moon of, I don't know how to pronounce the name of the moon of Jupiter. But then, yeah, my question was like, if there is water, there is life. Is it true? But then, is the life there different from our idea of life? Because if there is, like you mentioned, liquid water, and our idea of life that is like we live on Earth, but then we have these different communications that we have in the spiritual world, showing that there is this spiritual life in other forms, other vibration levels in other planets. So, and another comment was that I was listening today about also life in Mars, the description of life in Mars by the spirit of Umberto de Campos. There was a book by Chico Xavier called New Messages in English. And he was also describing the life in Mars. But then that's my question. So like, is the idea of life that we are talking now here is the life that we live here on Earth? And then can we not open or broaden our idea of life in other forms or vibration levels in other planets, and then call it, or is it a problem of lack of words for it? And because we're using life, and in Lithuanian we have life as the life we have, like gyvenimas, and gyvybės, so every form of life, so everything that is plant or animal, or they call one name, and people, but then we say life, but then is this not some other types of lives in other planets that we don't have then the instruments, no, for describing it?
So, a very interesting question. Thank you, Nadja. And very complex one. I'll try to answer everything that you asked. So indeed, water vapor has been found in Ganymedes. So what we learned from that, there is water there. And there is perhaps water in liquid form. So that's the only thing that science can say, right? Science can make speculations. So we can speculate about life, right? But it's not the role of science to say, okay, we find water, then there is life there. We cannot say that. So science has its limits, right? And it has its own limits set by itself, because that's the scientific method. We cannot go past it, right? So other forms of life. There is a branch of astronomy called astrobiology these days. And this is a very rich field For instance, we found organic molecules in deep space. We found amino acids, sugar, alcohol, right? In deep space, in interstellar clouds, floating in space. How those organic, very complex molecules formed. Fascinating, because this material that's hanging on space, interstellar material, is going to be the building block of planets later. So it's possible that when Earth formed 4.6 billion years ago, Earth formed already with material rich in organic molecules. That's extremely interesting. We are proving that, but we didn't find any evidence of life. For instance, one branch of research these days is research on extremophiles. I don't know if you heard about them. Extremophiles are microscopes that live in extreme conditions on Earth. We found microbes living in boiling water, 120 Celsius, deep in the ocean, boiling water. It would kill us immediately, and it's flourishing there, right? So very acidic environments. We found we found life. For instance, we found that there are some life forms that survive in space without any atmosphere. So these extremophiles, what they tell us, they tell that life flourish in conditions that are very different than the ones that we have in the planet. So yes, we must broaden our concept of life. We must be looking elsewhere, not only when there is liquid water. We could be looking elsewhere. For instance, there are people looking for life in the clouds of Venus these days. There is no water there, but perhaps there is life. We are looking for life. The point, Nadja, is that the answer that I give you as a scientist, as a professional astronomer, is that life, science so far didn't find any evidence of life. Nothing that stands trial, nothing that other scientists could replicate. Because remember that when a scientist make a claim, I found life, this claim must be verified by other scientists. That's how scientists work. So I'm not saying that Spiritism is wrong. Very far from it. I'm a Spiritist myself. I'm just finding that this idea of life elsewhere, that's very important and a key concept for Spiritism, as I mentioned in my talk. This has not been backed up by hard scientific evidence yet. But this may change very, very soon in the era of the giant telescopes. So in the next decade, perhaps we can have another talk like this in 5-6 years, where matter is going to be very different. Perhaps we are going to have Planet X that we found 10 light years ago that have oxygen. If we find a planet that has oxygen in the atmosphere, there is no other alternative. This planet must have life. And vegetable life, right?
Alex, but this, like the question that you read from the Spirit's book, in which he says life is very different as well. I mean, it might be some kind of life that our instruments and technology has not yet achieved, because we're looking for life as we understand the life on our planet, isn't it? And the point that you made about having life within our own planet that live in quite different conditions from us, like you said something about the end, in the abysmal places in the ocean, there is life. I think they found some kind of bacterial life or something in those geysers that they have in North America, and the temperature is like 900 degrees. So there is diversity. And I read something, I'm not quite sure if it's true, some years ago, that they found some kind of life based on silicon rather than carbon, as we do, as we are. So even within the earth, there are many different kinds of life that we cannot perceive. So I think, like the question that Elsa asked and what we're reading in our literature, it might be some kind of life that our instruments not yet perceive, and we haven't enough knowledge to understand it yet. And also, I think maybe we haven't progressed well enough to achieve that knowledge. And, as you say, maybe soon we'll be able to find this life like we are, intelligent life like we are, and different kinds of life as well, isn't it? Our instrument to be able to find it. Because if we think, like dark matter has only been really discovered very recently, and until then we didn't know. But in the Spirit's book, he said, Kardec, the Spirit told Kardec that there is no void, that there was some fluid that we could not perceive. So there's things still to discover, isn't it?
Well, I would say that's for sure. That's also a very, very good question. I think it was Saint, how to say that in English, Saint Augustine.
Saint Augustine?
Yes, that said that if you ask me about God, I don't know the answer. But if you don't ask, I know the answer. Because if you ask me about God, I know. But if you don't ask, I don't know. So, sorry, it was the backward. Anyway, you got message.
Yeah.
And I can paraphrase Saint Augustine and say, if you ask me what is life, I don't know. But if you don't ask, I know. Because I can look at you and say, and I know that you're alive. I can look at a plant and know it's alive. I can look at a dog and a fish and know that they are alive. However, it is very important. But how to define life? What is life? Right? There are so many papers in modern literature in science trying to define life, and there is no definition. Like, for instance, it's like God. Like in Spiritist doctrine, you say we cannot define God, right? We can try to understand its attributes, right? All powerful, like almighty, things like
ubiquitous.
yes, ubiquitous, things like that. However, it's the same with life, right? There is no single phrase or single concept that defines life, but we do believe that life has attributes. Like, for instance, life must have a program, a purpose. It must be able to deal with improvisation. Life probably is compartmentalized in the sense that we have a skin that separates us from the rest of the environment. So life must be, in a way, compartmentalized. It must use energy. It must regenerate. It must adapt, right? So those are qualities of life. So if we see in our scientific career or something, if you go to Mars and you see something that adapts, that moves perhaps or not, but moves not, but adapts, it uses energy, it is compartmentalized. Perhaps you can say, okay, that's a living being that we cannot even begin to understand how it works. But you see, it must have some qualities. It must have some properties, and we are trying to define what.
We do not die, only our physical body dies, and that our spirit lives on. And we have more than proof. We accept that that's the truth, and yet it's alive, but we cannot see or perceive. So I don't know if you understand that I meant. We do live on, and yet we don't, because our body dies, but our spirit lives on in a very different way. But it is alive as well, wasn't it?
It is alive, but it is not currently in the realm of science.
No.
Science has no instruments to measure, to probe the spirit. Perhaps it will one day, and I believe as a spirit. Now it's a belief. So I'm not talking anymore as a scientist. I'm talking as a spiritist.
Yeah.
Right? I believe that science one day will have the means to probe the spiritist world, the spirit world, and to weigh their bodies, understand what they are made of, right? Because there are many questions that me and other spiritist science make that are very hard, very difficult to answer, right? Very baffling, I would say.
Yeah.
Baffling questions, very.
Alex, I think you should come for the second time because there are so many questions in my private messages here, questions, and we are really now 12 minutes past of our time. What you people here, but we wanted the Charles questions well. Ready?
Yeah, yes, okay. But my question was similar to Silvia's one, and Alex has already partially answered. Of course, we know as spiritists, that the spirits are living, that they are around us. So spiritual life is a kind of life, albeit it is not in our four-dimensional space-time. It is not. So, and it is not detected by our instruments. Nevertheless, since we as individuals, as incarnated spirits, we are part of those two dimensions, incarnated on the material world, but also pertaining into the spiritual world. There are, of course, all what Allan Kardec did, the investigations about mediumship, about materializations, about several type of phenomenon, interaction between this spiritual world and our world. There are ways, even if not instruments, or maybe photographs, or even in case of ectoplasm, some castings or things like this, to find evidences of this spiritual life. So, of course, when we get something from the spirits talking about life, it's of course not only incarnated life, life in the same format, in the same four dimensions as we are. We talked about the distance in light years, but this does not work in the spiritual world. It's a different dimensions. It's beyond our four dimensions, and that is then increasing tremendously the complexity of this research of life, because I think most of what we have discussed here, Alex, I think you agree with me, is to see if there is life in very similar way, and at least in the material world, as we are presenting, as we are currently in it. But of course, when the spirits are saying there is life in Mars, there is life in Jupiter, and so on, it's maybe a spiritual life and not material life as we are used to it. So it's tremendously increasing the complexity of all these researches.
I agree with you. So I've been answering as a scientist. And as a scientist, what I can say is that material life, things that our senses and instruments can measure, haven't been found. But of course, we can speculate by other forms of life. But I'd like to provoke a little more, perhaps just leave this open issue for perhaps for a future talk. I don't know what's your profession, Mr. Charles, but imagine
Engineer.
you're an engineer. So imagine that you go to an engineer community and say that you are completely ignorant of about 95% of your subject matter. Would you consider yourself a good engineer or not?
Yeah, it's a good question, of course, because we have to stay humble and to know that, as we have seen so many progress in this field, that when you take an engineer 100 years ago, the set of knowledge is completely different from. There were not even engineers at that time. Engineers is a kind of a profession that was only developed the last century and not before.
So the reason I'm asking you, and your question, your answer was very good, because being humble is very important, is the following. If you go to a modern congress, a congress about modern cosmology, after 30 years of instruments flying in space and measuring everything that you can measure, from all perspectives, from all wavelengths, from all different particles about the cosmos. So that's the summit of human knowledge. Cosmologists are going to tell you that we understand 5% of the matter of the universe. And 95% of the matter we have no idea what is made of. We call it dark matter. We call it dark energy, but we have no idea what's made of. And this is science. That's what scientists I talk today. We have no idea what 95% of the universe is composed of. And the reason I mention this is that when you say that there is a spiritual life, there must also be spiritual bodies. And these bodies, André Luiz, one of the spirits that wrote many books through Chico Xavier, André Luiz says, bodies, spiritual matter is real matter. It's not like quintessential matter or anything, it's real matter. So perhaps the spirits are pointing to us. Astronomers, cosmologists are looking for the composition of the cosmos, but we found only 5%. We can explain only 5% of the gravity of the cosmos. Where is the other 95%? Perhaps in the spiritual realm, who knows?
Sure, as you say, perhaps. So this is a clear sign that the current paradigm of science is slowly but surely getting in crisis, because when you need to have 95% of unknown forms of matter or energies in order to explain in equations, mathematical equations, what you are seeing, it's a proof that the model is really far from being complete. There are a lot
The
of
model
things
is
that we
far from
don't
being complete.
understand yet.
Yeah. So scientists must be humble, of course. And we cannot lose perspective that we are still scratching the surface of the cosmos, right?
Stevan.
My friends, it's already 20 minutes past. We need to end. Apology, we do have very good questions here, like from Faye, from Guilherme, from Oslo. I will give these questions to Alex, and we will put the reply on the Facebook, on the YouTube, when you ask those questions. And here it's I think the invitation is already made. You need to come another day. We need a second round. And
it is going to be my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and we will.
We didn't talk about UFO.
Huh? Yeah, no, that's one of the questions is missing here.
We should not even start down this road.
No, exactly. You know, we need a second round. We need a second round. We will see how is your agenda, and we can book another Wednesday with you.
We should discuss before discussing UFOs. We should discuss Drake's equation. That's a fascinating subject. Drake's equation. I could bring that for you next time.
Man, look the face of Miss Gibbons here. She's delighted. She's delighted. Okay. So thank you very much.
I would go on, until all the questions were answered. Really.
Yeah.
The time is fugit, as they say.
Yes. And I go very quickly here with our announcements, very, very quickly. And we needed to. So, on this Saturday, 4 p.m., we do have spiritual questions about animals with Dr. Oslo Karsoff, which is brother of Professor Alex. So, Dr. Allos will talk about the animals. It's 4 p.m. London time on the 28th of August, this Saturday. Also, we have here on the following Saturday, 4th of September, we will have our dear friend Faye Waddingham talking about the mystery of Joan of Arc. It is in commemoration of the 175th year of Leon Denis. And also on the 11th of September, we will have our Congress of Suicide Conference on Suicide Prevention, organized. All these events are organized by Cardiac Radio, British Union Spirit Societies, Cardiac Group, and Irish Spiritist Federation. So don't miss this. It's wonderful to have all these events in English ready for you. Please save the date. Also, the Cardiac Group, they do have their podcasts, insightfully speaking, and you can find it on Cardiac Group webpage, also on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and Deezer. And last but not least, we do have Cardiac Group is organizing a high five event in order to support two institutions in Brazil. One is in Salvador, Grupo Espírita Sheila, and another one is in Curitiba, Instituto Multirão. So if you are interested in donate anything, please go to www.cardiac.org.uk/high five, and you will learn how you can help. And that's it, very briefly here. So thank you for our friends here, Guilherme, Maria Eugenia, Faye, Ruben, and again, we will give your questions. For those questions unanswered here on live, we will give it to Professor Alex. He will reply and we will post these answers on the platform you ask it. Okay? Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have you all here. I wish you all a wonderful good night. And Professor Alex, we will see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And it was great. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.